Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Indulge podcast. I'm Rupam Jain, and today I have with me Akhila Ramnarayan, who actually needs no introduction. Thank you so much, Akhila, for joining us. I know you have a really busy schedule. You're putting together a benefit concert, and we'll touch upon all of that. But so Akhila is a professor, a scholar. She wears multiple hats. She is a musician, a poet. So let me just ask you, Akhila, was it one thing, one profession led to another, or did you always want to pursue, creative fields more than one?
I think everything goes back to my childhood. I grew up with a deep love of reading, just because everybody around me, my parents in particular, were avid readers, and we had thousands of books at home, and nobody ever censored what I read. So I was reading far in advance of what a child should be reading or what a teenager should be reading, because the books were all there and there wasn't any social media. And I don't even think we had a proper TV for a long time. Love of books and love of music. I've had them since, music was always around me since I was a child. So that's where I think everything has come from the interest in theatre. I'm a theatre actor. The interest in music and the interest in writing and research scholarship is because I just had access and nobody censored me. Everybody said, just go out and explore whatever you're interested in. I was really lucky that way. So I wouldn't say that, I set out to be many things in my life. But I also think I'm just curious about different things because I grew up in this very eclectic environment. My dad was a cricketer too. So there was this other sort of sports angle. So my dad and my uncle played state cricket.
You've played sports too?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm tall. I should have.
You should have. Basketball.
I never did. Yeah, I never did. I was always in a book. Always in a book.
Yeah.
That's
why probably you're right.
Yeah. So that's where it came from. And then my mother taught me music. So in a lot of ways, I should say my mother is responsible for most of this, because she used to read aloud to me poetry, of course, children's stories and all that, but lots of stuff in advance. Apparently, she read Shakespeare to me when I was still in the womb.
Oh my God. Seriously?
Yes.
Okay.
And then she also taught me music. So I had probably my first music lesson when I was 2 or 3, cathartic music.
Okay.
And my parents had a very amazing vinyl collection of LPs. Everything from Hindi film music of yesteryear to Cat Stevens, the Beatles, and also lots of Carnatic and Hindustani music. So I grew up
a mix of everything. Which
and
is so good.
Yeah, they were 70s hippies in a weird way as well. I grew up in Hyderabad, so these were all the wonderful strains and strands that contributed to.
So I'm not sure
who I am today. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't think you can pick one, but if I were to ask you, what do you enjoy most? Like being a professor, being a theatre actor, being a musician? What do you enjoy most?
Let me start with this. Okay. I have a deep love of language. Okay. Language feels like an endless mystery to me. You can keep probing, you can keep finding new meanings. I think I'm a reader. I love reading the most. That doesn't answer your question. So for me, any creative act comes from that love of stories and the love of language and the love of the word, the love of subtext under the words, the love of a world of imagination. That's what really excites me. But if I had to pick one at this point in time, this past decade has been the decade of theatre for me. I really immersed myself in the world of theatre. But if I were to say now, I think my energies are in songwriting and music. That's really what gets me really excited. In a flow state. I don't notice time passing at all if I'm writing a song or working on music.
Yeah. Which brings me to ask you, you released Way Big On, And you stated that it was as a response to everything that was happening around the world. You've also called it your typical midlife crisis stuff. Was it really that?
Woe Begone is an album, an indie rock album that I released a year ago with my musical collective called Akhila and the Alchemists. It's not just me, it's 5 other really brilliant musicians who generously jumped in and gave, everything they had creatively to the project. It's a little independent music project, self-produced. So, and these are all professionals, so I'm deeply grateful to all of them. But it started out basically one day I woke up in 2018, end of 2018, feeling really blue. And I had taken a break from music. I'd done a bit of music for theatre here and there, but I hadn't been doing any rock music, which I used to be in bands before. And I woke up and I just wasn't feeling good about the world, about myself. My parents had some health setbacks in 2017 and 2018. And I was sort of, periodically, some days you just, wake up in the morning on the wrong side of the bed and,
off days.
Those off days and you're like, okay, what's the point of all this? And I was brushing my teeth and this word, woe begone, came into my head and it really translates to sad. I mean, the definition.
Just like that, like you just
I told you I love words. Everything comes from that. So then I was like, but if you actually separate the words, woe means sorrow and begone means get going, right? So I was like, that's really interesting. And then next minute, I just started writing a song. And then you can maybe play it for your listeners. It's on Spotify.
We will.
And what is really lovely is that that song became one more song and one more song and one more song. And suddenly we had a whole album. And this was recorded over the pandemic remotely. And it became a way to hold hands at a time that we were all isolated in our own homes. The rest of the album, one of my collaborators is in America, Doug Caraway. Vedant was in his house here in Chennai. Paul Jacob was in another place, fine musician. Shreya, Devnath and Praveen Sparsh were in their own homes. Everybody had a studio, so we just recorded and shared music, and it was a way to not go insane during the pandemic. Very beautiful experience. Every time somebody played something and shared the Logic project, the sound files, it felt like opening a gift, in the middle of a very dark time. So I don't know about the midlife crisis, to answer your question. I joked about this earlier, actually, because the stereotype is typically men, when they hit a certain age, typically in their 40s, will go do something impulsive and rash and stupid, like buying a fancy red sports car, just because they're worried about growing older. So I joked about this and said, maybe this is my midlife crisis, because making an album is not cheap. I mean, I'm sure you've heard from indie musicians about how if you want to self-produce work, which is what I foolishly wanted to do, it's not cheap. And, everybody was so wonderful about doing this with me. So I just wondered whether it's worth the heartache, especially given, the harsh realities of digital release in the music industry, whether it's really worth it at all to even try to do this for 5 people to listen to your music. But then we were making this music for ourselves. So I don't think it was a midlife crisis. Rather, it was a way to write through and work through, I think, the greatest riddles and conundrums of our time. We live in an ecological crisis, we're ignoring it. We're growing older, we're ignoring it. We are experiencing rampant commercialism all around us. And we succumb to the pressure of that. We ignored that. We are living beyond our means. We ignore it. So, I mean, it just felt like I could think about these things and think through them and feel them, because each of these these issues is not just an issue in the air that you discuss on, news anchors discuss on TV, and people talk about in podcasts. They affect individual lives. They affect my life. They affect yours. So songwriting became a way for me to experience some catharsis about, I think, the big questions of our times, the questions that face me, I mean, that I face in my daily existence.
Yeah. The pandemic also sort of, changed our perspective towards a lot of things, towards life itself, don't you think?
Yes. Absolutely.
Do you think we needed it to, just wake us up from our slumber?
Yeah, I wish it didn't have to be a global,
It didn't have to be, I know.
But that tells you how many things we're ignoring, actually.
Yeah.
Because we need a world catastrophe for us to finally wake up and look at ourselves in the mirror, see who we are. Aside from the rat race and aside from the 100 pressing concerns of every day, we're so consumed with our 24/7 news cycles and lives and the next big thing, and social media is eating up all our time, and we didn't have any way to introspect or reflect or think about who we are as individuals, as society. So maybe, yeah, you're right. Maybe, the pandemic in some way produced that kind of introspection. And also for me personally, it made me realize that music is really what floats my boat. It's my reason for being.
And it's
very cathartic for me.
Okay. Yeah. Talking about, midlife crisis and ageism, your new EP, Waves, touches upon the same subject. It's got ageism as its theme. Would you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't say ageism is the theme, because any ism is an ism, but and some convenient coinage for us to think about some much bigger issue. But yes, again, this is related to the pandemic and the isolation of the pandemic. I wrote these 3 songs that seem to have a sort of a strand of questioning about who we are, why we're here, the essential. This is going to get really dark. Loneliness.
No, that's absolutely fine. We need to talk about it.
The essential loneliness of the human condition, and what it feels like to know that you are growing older, your life too will end, and so will that of your loved ones. And this came out of my actual experiences. The passing of my grandmother in February 2020. Just dealing, with, parents who are struggling with their own medical problems sometimes. All of us go through this. And we're all at an age where, our friends are also going through this. So this had become a topic of conversation between me, other family members, friends, the older generations who we adored and looked up to, who are our superheroes. Now you see them, they're a little slower, they're struggling a little bit, they don't seem to, or that's how you perceive it. They don't seem to have the answers. You could go to them with certainty and get certain answers. But as you get older, you realize that there are shades of gray. So all these questions, I think, led to these 3 songs that didn't seem to really fit anywhere else. But I must say this, I also developed I've been doing yoga for some time, and I developed a meditation practice. And I wrote these songs not as an exercise in prolonging my depression or anxiety or worry, but as a means to accept and welcome the complexity of life, to explore these shades of gray in a meaningful way, and to build the strength to be resilient, to live your life with simplicity and grace and beauty. So I think the songs do deal with these darker themes, but they are on the whole positive in their approach to these themes.
I am sure they are positive because, as we talk, there's so little conversation around these topics, which you're saying dark and gray, but which actually needs like a dialogue. So I want to go back to your previous album, and I remember when you released that, and it was covered and there were articles. Somewhere they stated your age, like at 27 Akhila releases her album.
47.
At 47, sorry, I'm so sorry. At 47 Akhila releases her
If
album.
it was 27, I'd have so much time to make
No,
more
I mean,
music.
no, I meant 47. So while we can look at it as a celebration, the fact that it's put out there, it just kind of feels like, you're not supposed to be doing this at 47. You might as well do this at 27. Probably that's why I said 27. So did that hit you, or do you think that's how a lot of people think?
Well, certainly the music industry, especially the pop and rock music industry, I think rewards the young. Even though there are some very great musicians who I admire deeply, who are still around making amazing music. I mean, take Patti Smith, Tori Amos, Bob Dylan, Buddy Guy is still going strong, and making incredible music. Willie Nelson's, of the world. There are lots of musicians who are still relevant. But this other thing, this worry about relevance. Everybody's thinking that, if you hit 30, you're irrelevant.
Yeah,
And I've never had a problem with this. I think I'm extremely relevant. I keep telling my students in college this. It's like, I think I'm cooler than you.
Absolutely.
But, you know,
Yeah.
So, what was your question? Your question was about wondering whether
putting what you can do into brackets.
Yeah, exactly. I was proud of it. So that headline, I think, came out of the fact that I said it so many times. I'm so proud of making my first full-length independent music album at the age of 47. This was my childhood dream. I was one of those kids who took a hairdryer or a hairbrush and, stood in front of the mirror and thought I was a rock star. And I was singing away to myself, every song I could, range of influences, and rebelling against my Carnatic music classes. Dreams of rock and roll, safety pins in my ears. I was obsessed with grunge at one point. Kurt Cobain of Nirvana was my hero. So at 47, having done all these other things, been involved in the classical arts as well to some extent, engaged in Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam productions, scripting them and so on, I felt like I'd come full circle to what I wanted to do when I was a kid. My childhood dream, and I realized it at 47. So I wouldn't blame those copy editors who put that headline in, because I think I kept saying, I'm 47 and I made my first rock record, and I felt very proud of myself.
Oh my God, it was so cool.
So to me, so to me, it's like, yes, and partly maybe there is a sort of a expectation that at a certain stage in life, you're a pillar of society. You've sown all your wild oats. Your rock and roll careers, those dreams have to be put aside. So I was like, no. The time is now. If I don't do it now, when will I do it?
Exactly.
Like, can you tell how excited I'm getting about this?
I can totally see it.
And I was so grateful for all these amazing other musicians in my life, who, some of whom, Paul I've known since I was 18 years old, when I was in Women's Christian College here. And that's when I first met him. And so, so there's a collection of friends I've picked up along the way. They're each a treasure. And they all jumped in and said, yeah, let's make music together. And age didn't matter, and culture didn't matter. We just made music in the ways that, made sense, creative sense to each of us. And we brought it all together. And I got to share that with the world. Even if 4 listeners listen a month, that's fine by me. But I'm so grateful for this opportunity to do this before it was too late, because sometimes with age, something can give, the voice is unpredictable. Sometimes if you're a sports person, you can't do this. If you're a tennis player, you can't, get up at 47 and say, I'm going to revive my tennis, and hope to actually have something that you can give to the world in terms of, you can do it recreationally for fun. If you want and if your body permits. But I'm really lucky that
I'm glad you
was
celebrate.
able to do it.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you celebrate your age, but you would agree that we shy away from talking about it, right?
Yeah, and I think somewhere We do shy away. I never have. I've made it a sort of a personal
Like in general,
undertaking. Like, what?
in general, people do shy away from,
Yes,
like you
people
mentioned,
do, and especially women. They're not supposed to ask a woman her age.
exactly.
So for me, it's never mattered. I'm like, of
Yeah.
course you can ask me, and
Of
what's the
course.
big deal?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be shy about telling you. I'm going to be 49 on Friday.
Amazing.
Yeah, so, and I'm quite proud of it.
You
Because
should be.
each
I'm
year
so glad.
with each year I've walked so many more steps in my journey. I've experienced so many other things. I've learned so much. I've been blessed by the encounters I've had with people. Why wouldn't I wear that like a badge of honor rather than to think of it as somehow rendering me irrelevant? I think I'm more relevant now than ever.
You are. Yeah.
Not just me, everybody.
Everybody. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, you're also putting together a concert at last. It's called At Last, a benefit concert. This is to help aging women and destitute women. You want to talk about that?
I'd love to talk about this. So, like you mentioned, The Waves is an album that's about these themes of mortality and aging and living a good life. What does that mean? To the end, I'm quoting Atul Gawande, a book called Being Mortal, which really changed my life. I read it in 2018. And it's about, the situation of geriatrics and elderly populations and how the medical industry sort of takes care of their medical needs, but the psychological needs are never met, and the emotional needs aren't met. So it's a very beautiful book, and he talks about what older people want is a good life to the end. So I think Gawande's book has really sort of stayed with me, and this year, when we released the EP around September, October, I think, I started thinking about what it would mean to actually think of art as a means for social impact and in a meaningful way, not just have some fashionable cause and some benefit in a 7-star hotel and, pretend to be concerned about, these ravaged populations in some other part of the world. But in what ways could I think about getting people to have dialogues around this topic? And I thought I should take one baby step. So on my birthday, on December 9th, we're doing this benefit concert. And it is for women who are elderly and destitute, and residents of Vishranti. It's a home in Palavakam. It's been around since the 70s. It has a very inspirational founder. Her name was Savitri Vaiti. She started the home when she was 18 or so, and she lived there as a resident towards the end. She made this her life's mission, bringing women who were rendered homeless out of the streets and into the home and giving them that good life to the end that Kawandi talks about. She passed away during the pandemic. And I've since visited that home and met with the residents, and I want to continue that relationship with them. It's my way of thinking about this. Maybe it's sometimes I wonder if it's some elaborate means of catharsis for myself that I'm doing this. But why not? If it's a way in which to connect with people who need our support and help. And so far, it's just been wonderful. I've met the trust office bearers, and I've met the residents and the staff at Vishranti, and they're struggling because their donations dried up a bit during the pandemic, and they've been quite well supported through the years to just manage, but they need to renovate the building, which has been around since the 1960s, I think, and so I'm trying to raise some funds now through this concert, but I hope to be able to volunteer there, take students there, and continue the conversation, sit and sing with the women there and, spend some time with them.
Yeah, we're so looking forward to the concert. But you're also doing this on your birthday, like you mentioned. Is that on purpose?
Yes, it is on purpose. And I'm doing it because I try to do something every year on my birthday that is creative and is some kind of a creative milestone. So this is the first time I'm trying to move away from just artistic self-expression to some larger dialogue and conversation. I want it to be the start of something every time I do something on my birthday. Last year, we released a single that has special meaning for me. And a lyric video that I made myself. So it is. So this is a baby step in participating in a larger conversation. And so basically, I asked some fellow artists, poets, performers, very acclaimed, wonderful, accomplished artists, if they'll celebrate my birthday with me, and that's what we're all doing. So there are Anita Ratnam, K. Srilata, Thomas Pruksma, Bharat Kumar. These are some of the Sunanda Raghunathan, the actor. So they're all doing short pieces, and then we're going to have music by Paul Jacob, sounds, Vedant Bharadwaj and me.
Okay, but if I may ask, when did this start, like doing something on your birthday?
In 2015, I gave my first solo performance in Agartala. And it was for, I received an award, a theatre award that year. And it was during the Chennai floods. And with great difficulty, we got there and I did that performance. And it felt so momentous that I was able to pull that off, that I decided that every year I will try and do something meaningful on December 9th.
That's so nice. That's so nice. Okay, I'm not letting you go without asking you this last question, since we're talking about women, we talked about aging, we've talked about a lot of things. While we have come a long way when we talk about feminism, I think we still have a long way to go. What are your views? What do you think?
It's a no-brainer for me.
Where are we?
It's a no-brainer for me. Look at the statistics. I mean, how poorly India is doing on a world scale in terms of its treatment of women. Yes, we have a long way to go.
Do you even think we understand feminism?
Yeah, I think that people have preconceived notions when it comes to the F word, feminism. Yeah. And I think that they tend to think of very dogmatic interpretations of that word, or caricatures of from the 60s and 70s. But I think feminism is just a way to think about how patriarchies, and there are multiple patriarchies, affect the lives of all individuals, men, women, other genders, children. I mean, think about gender non-conforming and gender non-binary populations and the kinds of struggles they face on a daily basis because of patriarchy. So I think feminism arose out of basic stuff. Women's right to work, women's right to vote. That's why we still have an International Women's Day every March, because we're not there yet. We're not there yet on so many levels. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not commenting on the politics or the politician here. I'm keeping ideology out of this. But when Kamala Harris was touted to be Vice President of the United States, all people could talk about is her fashion sense, right? Yeah. Why? I mean, they're not doing that with the male politicians who are running for office, right? So I just find that remarkably short-sighted, a tendency to diss feminism. Because it's somehow passé or irrelevant, or it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. And we have a long way to go from the kinds of internalizing of gender roles that we do, the kind of pressure that puts on men, for instance, alpha male men who are supposed to hold in their feelings and not talk about anything that matters. Under the umbrella of feminism, we can have multiple conversations about what it means to be a human being in the world today. We can talk about non-humans, the way humans are treating non-humans, and feminist perspectives afford I can go on forever about
No,
this.
please do.
But feminist perspectives afford ways of doing and being that are less violent than patriarchal ways of being and doing. We learn to have dialogue, for instance. We learn to share. We learn to have other models of leadership than the one where you have one autocrat and everybody's bowing and scraping. You know, consensual conversations, building consensus, being democratic, taking everybody's opinions and claims seriously, being respectful, being kind, being gentle, listening. You know, so don't tell me feminism is irrelevant. I think we should study it. If we're confused by the word or we resist the word, we should look at what the word has meant in the past. We should look at what it means now. What does it mean, you know, to people of color? What does it mean to different minority populations? So,
Like you said, you can go on.
I can go on forever.
On and on.
Yeah.
All right. So on that note, we'll bring this show to an end. Thank you so much, Akhila.
Thank you.
It was such a lovely conversation. I mean, like, even I can go on and on talking to you because it's so lovely. And thank you so much for taking our time and visiting us and talking to us. Thank you so much, Akhila. And we're looking forward to the benefit concert. I'm sure it's.
Yes, thank you so much.
Akhila.
Thank you.
Thank you.